Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. The season is winding down. That means we got to celebrate Victory Monday a little bit harder. The Miami Dolphins beat the Cleveland Browns 20-3 on top of both the Broncos and Colts losing, which means 18 weeks of being in the hunt, or should I say being in the Huntley. What's going on, Josh? Happy Victory Monday.
Happy Victory Monday, Jake. And before we get into this, I just want to quick thank you and Kat for holding down the fort last week with the preview show and everything. Crazy times around the holidays here at the Houtz's house. But yeah, man, to be able to come in here, 1 week left of the season to still be in the hunt. It's crazy when this team was once at 2-6. So happy to be able to come on here. More excited than I guess I should be. But as we'll talk about, man, the season, man, they're still hanging on, and that gives us a little bit of hope.
If being a Dolphins fan was drinking a type of alcohol, I think it would be moonshine. To go from 2-6 to 8-8 is so in the hunt Miami Dolphins in the purest form possible. And Josh, being a fan of this franchise is so challenging because the Dolphins, solid performance in the 20-3 win against the Browns. And I think we're a little bit more excited about it because you'd never expect to win by 17 points when you have your backup quarterback starting. A crazy twist of events where Tua Tagovailoa, who is questionable with a hip injury throughout the week, something I think we both just kind of said, okay, sure, Tua's questionable. Let's talk about Tyreek. Let's talk about Waddle. But the idea was that Tua's going to be there. Everything's good to go. JK on Saturday, he was downgraded to doubtful. Sunday, Huntley gets the start. So, man, what a crazy, wild ride for Dolphin fans as you're just trying to enjoy the last few weeks of the football season.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just that's so Dolphins mindset, right? I don't know if you know, Jake, you don't have kids yet, but when you do, I mean, there's a song from Moana called Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride, and we are all on the Hawaiian roller coaster ride, right? I mean, you mentioned it, man. We just figured the questionable thing was whatever, it's just messed up throughout the year. He's banged up. It's just the bruises that come with this late in the season, but then he gets downgraded doubtful, and we're sitting here like, come on, man, really? The critical game. We know how bad Tua want to get out there. We heard Mike McDaniel say it today. It was almost like the trainers just felt that he cannot go. And I think that's a little bit alarming in its own right. But for Snoop Huntley to truly step up, man, 22 of 26, 225 yards, the one touchdown. I think he had the best quarterback PFF grade for anyone throughout the year. And that got everyone so angry. So kudos to Snoop Huntley for really stepping up when the Dolphins needed it most. And he did some of it on the ground as well. I think it's funny. He led the team in rushing, and that just brings back shades of that year when Ryan Fitzpatrick led the team in rushing, Jake. Remember how down and out we were? So Snoop Huntley really stepped up, put this team on his back, and he might have to do it again this week in a must-win game against the Jets. But pretty stoked for his performance. What were your thoughts on Snoop Huntley, Jake, in that offense, who, again, 20-3, a little bit of a surprise victory when all things were backs against the wall?
Snoop had 4 incompletions, Josh. 3 of them, spike, throwaway, drop. That is insane. That is so insane. It was so much fun to watch because above all else, for how well he played, he looked comfortable in this Miami Dolphins offense. Something that we all thought was learning Latin was this Mike McDaniel offense. But who would have thought, Josh, that 1 week of Tyreek Hill saying, I'm going to practice hard this week, all of a sudden 9 targets, 9 receptions from Snoop Huntley, man. That is just such a impressive performance, and I'm going to be a broken record for a lot of this episode, but how does that make you feel as a Dolphins fan when you can see, and don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say Huntley can go out there every single week and Tyreek's going to be like that. And I'd even argue that Tyreek, for what he's making, there was a play where he had like a 20-yard reception, whereas he got tripped by his shoestrings, where I think in past years we'd see Tyreek taking that one to the house. But there were just these situations, man, where you see them playing so well, things clicking, and this is without a rushing attack. You mentioned it. 52 of Miami's 74 rushing yards were Snoop Huntley. That is awesome. Mike McDaniel looked like an offensive guru. But Josh, how can we see this and not think about 3 things specifically? 24-3 loss to the Seahawks, 31-12 loss to the Titans, and 16-10 loss to the Colts. How is this pendulum swing so wide, dude? That is just, I want to enjoy this win and I want to celebrate, and I promise we're going to do that. But man, I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, and I mean, I used the Hawaiian roller coaster ride, but what it's like being a Dolphins fan, man. I mean, it just seems like it's an up and down flow of things. I wonder if maybe Mike McDaniel, maybe learned some things throughout the season. I want to say that maybe he learned to, game plan differently in certain situations. Snoop Huntley admitted, he's got this offense down differently,
Mhm.
understanding the
Right.
motions and things like that. Maybe just in practice going out there and, maybe getting some reps down with Tyreek Hill that maybe didn't have. I don't know what the difference was, but I mean, when you look back at that, I mean, those are the games that ultimately ruined it, put is why the Dolphins are in this situation right now. So it definitely makes you wonder what the issue is. But I guess as we tip our hat to Snoop Huntley, you mentioned it, man. Tyreek Hill, he really seemed like he took offense to his piss poor play last
We
week. I
did
think he
too. I
tried.
took offense
Yeah,
to it.
we all did, and he went out there and he balled out like you said, 9-9. I think he had his most yards per route, 3.8 on the year, the most since week 1 where he ran 4.1. So 9-9, 105 yards. He stepped up and um, I just don't know, like you said, man, if it's a testament to Mike McDaniel learning, game planning right, doing all the right things, or bigger questions that we might have to answer later down the road.
I worth saying to all the ghosts who are yelling at their radio, spending more time in the system definitely does help. But I still think there's such a huge gap between the struggles, the offense that couldn't do anything earlier in the season, and being a perfect 9 for 9 with the NFL's fastest wide receiver that not every quarterback can get him the ball. Just head scratching. But man, I really had a fun time watching this group of Dolphins playmakers. Obviously, Snoop Huntley is not going to light the world on fire. It was a lot of easy plays, a lot of easy passes, but Jonnu Smith caught 3 or 4 targets for 26 yards and a touchdown. And Malik Washington, man, 6 round picks. It's crazy to think like they're gonna like have an impact on the season. I think there's a stat that I don't even know if half of them make it to the opening day roster, but for him to be a playmaker, 4 of 5 for 41 yards, and I think he would have had a couple of pretty nice special teams plays that would have been nice if they weren't called back because of penalty. But overall, man, they just had a fun group of playmakers. Waddle wasn't out there, but for pass catchers, a lot of capable guys. River Craycraft, he had a 3rd down conversion, I think.
Yeah, he did. He had a nice third down conversion. I think earlier in that drive, there was another good throw from Snoop Huntley. But you said they're a fun unit. It was fun to watch them, and I know isn't that a little bit alarming? I mean, I find it kind of felt like most of the year just doom and gloom. Man, like why the hell are we doing this? It was like pulling teeth, and for some reason, like you said, man, this offense, this game was more exciting to watch, and I don't know what that's testament to, but absolutely, man, with Malik Washington stepping up, some of those other players. I mean, you see the way they're utilizing him now with some of those motions and things. Johnny Smith had a touchdown. That guy's unbelievable. So, fun is the best way to put it. I just wish we could see more from this rushing game, right? You can see the offensive line, the clear issues there at guard. I don't know where Jalen Wright is. I mean, you could put him on a milk carton at this point. They're not even using him. Jeff Wilson's holding his head on 4th and 1 because they're running crazy shit. I mean, definitely some issues, but dude, this was one of the more fun games. And again, we're 8-8. What better place could you be at this point than
As a
in
Dolphins fan,
yeah, just as God intended.
Did you start to have any questions about the future when you're watching someone like Malik Washington? Like you mentioned it, man. He looked really comfortable in this offense, the motions, the way they're able to get him the ball in space. Jonu's here next year. I mean, you have Tyreek catching 9 of 9. Uh, Jalen Waddle, like are we gonna have to have a long talk during the offseason, man? Do you kind of see what I'm getting at here? Does it kind of seem like there's a trend here, especially when you consider Eric Azukama, and I believe he was actually activated to the 53-man roster this week, and then he was inactive on Sunday for more of these shorter, quicker wide receivers.
Yeah, it's something we got to talk about. I mean, we love the short guys, the quickness, but I mean, they don't hold up, right? We see the durability issues with Jalen Waddle. As much as we love him, he's going to eventually be maybe that whole what if situation. So, yeah, they need to kind of revamp this receiving core. But, for a couple weeks, I think we were all kind of like, trade Tyreek Hill, get whatever you want for him. Seeing him step up in this situation, seeing how much it meant to him, I'm not saying you don't trade him if the right, team comes calling, but I might pump the brakes on getting rid of him, especially when you see a guy like Jalen Waddle completely irrelevant down the stretch, just like quarterback 1. And that pains me too to say.
Speaking of pains, Jalen Waddle, he spoke throughout the week and he mentioned that he was doing some things in practice. He was being held back in some other scenarios. Josh, and people were talking about this on X, on Twitter. Do you have any concerns, especially to swing it back to the Tua situation too? Do you have any concerns that maybe the Dolphins staff is being too cautious, too overly protective with some of these players when, the comment from one side is they're athletes and they should be out there playing. If they want to be out there playing, you should let them. And then on the other side, it's obviously the training staff just has their best interests in mind and you want to put the player first. I mean, it feels like a very tough conversation to have, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think we all kind of at some point wanted to just yeet this training staff, get rid of them, right? You completely revamp the thing. So I don't know what it is, but I've heard Mike McDaniel today talk about, and he's like, I'm not going to play someone that isn't medically cleared. And it was clear too, it wasn't medically cleared. They figured, worst case, he's going to be a sit and duck, right? He's going to re-aggravate, and then we weren't even going to see him the rest of the year if there's any chance we even see him now. So I'm okay with these doctors kind of, doing the right thing by the player. What do they call it? Keeping the player from themselves, protecting the player from themselves. Yeah. So I'm okay with that, but I'd love to have seen, Tua gut it out, but I mean, it sounded like that just wasn't possible. Same with Jalen Waddle.
No, I completely agree with you, and it's tough. And the thing is, everybody wants to live and die with every game. There's only 17 of them. The emotion is there. You want to see your guys out there. This dude just got paid. He's making $50 million a year. You want to see him out there balling. You remember the Baltimore game, the Bills game from a couple of years ago. Like, you want to see that in action. And when you can't, I think those frustrations come out in a lot of different ways. But yeah, I'm with you with the training staff, man. I mean, these are professional NFL franchises, and we see how Stephen Ross invests in Hard Rock Stadium, invests in this franchise. I'm going to trust the training staff too. I'm going to take Mike McDaniel's word, and I don't think we should get too caught up in that. Something I do want to get caught up, man. The entire internet is running with Devon Achane taking over as the next Tyreek Hill. What on earth is happening here? So there was a very weird outing for Devon Achane yesterday. 2 receptions for 13 yards, 10 carries for 25 yards, 2.5 yards per carry. And I think he had another outstanding diving to the ground catch that was called back because of a holding penalty. Man, is it going to happen? Is this something we're going to be talking about in 3 years, where even if Tyreek sticks around for a little longer, as we're talking about Devon Achane's long-term plan with the Miami Dolphins, is it going to be a receiving first mindset, do you think?
I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I can see where, CK Parrott and some other guys, I think we've even talked about before, right? Just kind of him. I mean, you joked about him being wide receiver 2, and it's almost, evolved in him being our wide receiver 1 as the running joke. So, I would much rather see him lining up at receiver, in the slot, things like that, being utilized in motion pre-snap than them trying to run up the middle with him.
Yeah.
When you got it, Jeff. So, I mean, if that's what it's going to take to just save the Dolphins from themselves, protect them from themselves, so be it. But I mean, I like Devon Achane, the running back that can also do the wide receiver type things. I don't think you want to try to box him in and, have him flank out. But, maybe we come to that point when you have Jalen Waddle, maybe injured or, desperate times call for desperate measures, but I don't see that happening. Do you, Jake? Do you see them doing that? And then I saw some people say you move Achane, then you can go ahead and get Ashton Genty, the crazy running back from Boise State. I mean, that'd be so Dolphins, wouldn't it, to draft a running back like top 15?
Full-blown Madden. Josh, I don't think we've talked about this yet. I kind of like him sticking at running back. I want to stop with the runs up the middle. A couple is great, but when it's an obvious situation where you're going to run up the gut, I'm fine on punting and Achane in those situations. But I like leaving him at running back because I think, like what San Francisco has done for so well, when you have guys you're facing different defenses, you can funnel targets to different positions. And when the Dolphins were doing so well, funneling the targets to Waddle and Tyreek, and now we see Jonnu Smith in the mix, I think it's only a matter of time till – actually, I can't say that because we already see it when Tua's out there, especially how they're able to get Devon Achane in the mix as a receiver. So I think him being in the backfield is going to remain an important part of that.
Yeah, I don't want to say I took offense to it, but I think the other week, Tua did an interview where he said Jonnu Smith was a security blanket. And I was like, come on, man, you can't say that because Devon Achane, I mean, I had to look it up, man. He has 87 targets this year. He caught 78 of those 87 targets, only 592 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. Then he had 192 touches in the ground game. So, I mean, I don't know how long you can continue to filter this thing through, our tiny little Alakazam or whatever we called him, but do it, man. Do it until I don't want to say till the wheels fall off because that's the wrong thing to say. But Devon Achane's a superstar. We're seeing it. He can be that security blanket. I like him in his current situation as well.
Before we flip the coin to the defense, Josh, I do want to ask you. You mentioned it. You hinted at a draft pick in the top 15th, and I'm going to probably ask you this a bunch of times from now until April. But right now, the Dolphins sit at 8-8. Who would you take? What position would you like in with that first round pick as of right now?
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about how we need to get a defensive lineman and an offensive lineman, but I still then look at safety, and I know Malachi Starks is the big first round, probably the safety one. So if he were to fall there in that, if you wanted a name, I'd say Malachi Starks. But if he gets drafted sooner than that, I mean, then you almost got to change where you're going. So safety, defensive line, offensive line, any which way you want to go, but as we know with the Dolphins, man, they'll try to fill those spots before the draft in free agency with veterans, and then just go best player available as we've seen year after year.
Best bench player available. Best sit on the bench player available. I ask Josh because I'm really leaning guard or the Dolphins really need to find a running mate for Jordan Brooks at linebacker because this dude is an absolute stud. He was the heartbeat of this defense, holding the Browns to a season best 3 points for this Miami Dolphins defense. And Josh, don't take my word for it. I think the best tweet of the week comes from LASIK.com, who reposted the unnecessary roughness penalty Jordan Brooks got on tackling Jerry Jeudy and offered the referees from that game free LASIK surgery because of how bad that penalty was. Great joke, great marketing. But Josh, I think of that first round pick. I mean, could you imagine the Miami Dolphins for how often they have two stout inside linebackers on the field? Get someone to go with Jordan Brooks, 9 tackles and a tackle for a loss, man. Sign me up.
Yeah, Duke Riley's not cutting in. I can sit here and joke about Channing Tindall or Channing Tinsel till I'm blue in the face. But yeah, man, Jordan Brooks has been an absolute stud. And it kind of seemed like that trade-off at the time. You know, Jerome Baker, Jordan Brooks, we clearly got the better end of that, I think. I did post his stats because I saw it on TV. 128 tackles, 3 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups, 2 fumble recoveries. That was, again, based off the television. And then you mentioned a running mate, man, Tyrel Dotson, a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. 15 total tackles in this game. He had a pass breakup. He had an interception as well. So, you know, maybe there's something there, a guy that the Dolphins just claimed out of nowhere. I know a lot of people were pissed off because I think he took his helmet off. But making some plays, and that's more than you could say about a Duke Riley and some of those other linebackers that I personally have hyped up over the years. But I would love to see a running mate alongside him because they absolutely need the depth.
I saw Jerome Baker starting for the Titans. I think David Long, he got cut by the Lions, and then I think he actually failed a physical for the Titans as well. I hope he can land somewhere because when he is on, man, he is a lot of fun to watch. But the Dolphins in the last couple of years haven't had a lot of draft picks, and the ones they haven't really hit on. So I've been trying to ask myself over these last couple of games because playoff hopes are still alive, but I've just been kind of trying to see, all right, when we start looking ahead to next year, who are some guys who could be maybe making a case? Tyrel Dotson at 26-year-old, I think has a really good case, Josh, because Miami doesn't have a lot of those younger guys. You mentioned it, Channing Tindall isn't really playing. I think this is a scenario because, I mean, Dotson was starting for the Seahawks at the beginning of the year. He was a originally undrafted free agent, spent a couple of years with the Buffalo Bills, veteran in the league. I think he's making a strong case to maybe come back. I'd love a situation where you have him maybe be a day one starter and then you draft that guy in the first round and he maybe takes his job by the middle of training camp. That's how you approach free agency. You mentioned it, Josh. Chris Grier really, or God, I hope it's not Chris Grier, but this front office really loves to get at least starters at every position and then draft someone and just kind of see how things play out. Dotson, his 15 tackles was a game high. He was absolutely everywhere. He had his second career interception. Both have come since he signed with the Dolphins. He had a really sick interception falling backwards. I can't remember who that was against. But man, that 15-yard penalty, I mean, this stuff is just so unacceptable. When you are in a situation where you are on a prove-it deal with the Dolphins, where you are claimed off waivers and you're trying to show your stuff and you're having an outstanding performance, 15 tackles, 8 solo, the interception, you cannot be doing things like that because I think that could be a difference maker. That could be the difference maker at the end of the year because he is a little bit on the older side. So you might maybe want to try someone who maybe is a little worse, but a little younger with the upside. I think that could be a real difference maker, and not to make him out of the molehill because I do think he played well.
Yeah, no, you're right. I know Larry Zonko was really pissed about that. I think he was tweeting out, never do that type of stuff. I'm an old school mentality, and it's true, man. That game, little things like that could absolutely cost you out the game. So, we would love to see this linebacking unit shirt up. And I don't know about you, man, but I wish I had the numbers down. But Anthony Weaver, I've been pretty impressed. Again, Hawaiian roller coaster ride, man. Maybe it's just his entire team, but like the defense, right, goes with the flow. They played very well, held the Browns to 3 points. Again, Calais Campbell's an absolute unit monster. Zach Steeler up front. But yeah, I want to see what they can do with another year with under Anthony Weaver and then Joe Barry and those linebackers, man. So yeah, Tyrell Dotson's great depth, but you're going to need a little bit something else next to Jordan Brooks long term. Is what you're saying. I hear you.
I think he'd be a cheap-ish re-sign and then that first-round pick, and I think you walk into next year hyped about this linebacking core led by Jordan Brooks. I was a little bummed because I was hoping we'd get a little Chop Robinson action here. He sits at 6 sacks. Jalen Phillips, he has the franchise rookie record at 8.5 sacks back from 2021. Emmanuel Agba, he had a sack, forced fumble. He actually had a great performance, really stood out. But DTR, Dorian Thompson Robinson, played so scared, man. It was so frustrating because I think he had 3 intentional grounding penalties. He threw a screen pass to somewhere there was 3 linemen and no receiver in the area. So I was really hoping that this would be a game where Chop Robinson could get a sack or 2 and that'd give us something fun to watch for next week. But for 4 straight quarters, man, this guy was just horrified in the backfield, completing 24 of 47 attempts for 170 yards. That's 3.6 yards per. Browns are going to need to look elsewhere. It ain't Deshaun Watson. It certainly ain't Dorian Thompson Robinson either.
No, I mean, maybe Jameis Winston changes this thing, but I like the way the Dolphins played in this one. I think it's funny that if you look back, I believe when the Dolphins were, trying to find a backup, a lot of people were like, trade for Dorian Thompson, trade for one of those, quarterbacks in Cleveland, and just so worked out, another man's trash is, another man's treasure. And we get Snoop Huntley, who then goes back to Cleveland and keeps the Dolphins in this one. So, oh man, it's just funny the way those things work. Would have loved to see Chop Robinson get a sack, but you're right, man. DTR seemed like he was just scared all day long, seeing ghosts. I want to say Sam Darnold style, but he doesn't do that anymore, does he? That dude's another level.
Another player, man, who's been on another level this entire season, Jason Sanders. He improved to 12 of 14 from 50 plus yards, 4 for 4 on kicks of the day, 2 extra points, 2 field goals. I was sassy about him earlier in the season. Man, the games all run together. What was it? The Colts game? I think there's a situation where Miami went for it on 4th down where they could have kicked a 50-something yarder. I wish they let him kick it. Really, Hawaiian roller coaster, man. Jason Sanders, the last few years have been an absolute roller coaster, but it's been great to see him be so sound. And for how bad Miami's special teams ace Saran Neal, 2 penalties yesterday. And then you have the announcer trolling us saying, special teams ace Saran Neal was smart enough to let the ball sit there so more time would kick off the clock. Man, they were trolling the hell out of us. But to bring it back, Jason Sanders, an absolute awesome player. And it's great to see him kicking strong, because if Miami would want to go on any sort of miracle run, and there's a reason the first time I mentioned a miracle run at 22 minutes, but it starts with having a kicker who's just absolute nails.
Yeah, I don't want to say the Dolphins played kind of scared in this one, but you could see that they were content, getting in field goal range and letting Jason Sanders do his thing. And I mean, it feels like all year long he's actually been that money sign. I mean, we were down on him at times. It has always been a roller coaster with him, but he's been money. But it always seems like the commentators are just trying to jinx him. That 54-yarder that just trickled in. I mean, we're all sitting there like, oh hell no, this is gonna be it's gonna be one of those Jason Sanders days. But no, man, he pushes through. So it's nice to have a weapon on special teams, even if it is just him. What did you think about Tyreek Hill returning kicks? That almost slipped my mind. I saw that and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Week 17. You couldn't have done that earlier when we could have used like that. I don't know.
McDaniel sitting there in the middle of the night, Saturday night. He's like, we've had this Tyreek guy for almost 3 years at this point.
He boots up Madden and he's back there returning kicks. Oh, that's actually a good idea.
Hold up for a second here.
Wait 1 minute.
Dude, Danny Crossman's got to go, right? Like, this was just another terrible performance. And I just have to wonder, I look at those Patriots teams and I hate to compare anything because it's been the greatest franchise or dynasty in NFL history. And that, kills me to say, but I mean, dude, I remember seeing billboards driving through Massachusetts for Matthew Slater, special teams ace Matthew Slater. And just looking at how poor the Dolphins have been at special teams the last few years since Danny Crossman's been alive, you just wonder, like, what ifs? Like, if the Dolphins were from, like, the bottom of the barrel on special teams, if they were 15th, if they were 12th, is that enough to win one more game? If you win one more game, you win the division last year. If you win one more game, week 17 doesn't mean nearly as much this year. So those are just issues that for this franchise, I still wonder, like, these guys have been here too long to not be winning in these margins. Like you can't be having like 5 straight years of these issues with Danny Crossman. It's insane. And they're special teams aces. Sorry.
No, you're right. Yeah, and I feel like just part of me just wants to see Mike McDaniel make a move, right? Like, just show that you just like you're tired of mediocrity, you're sick of this shit. Yeah, this is part exactly, and it just hasn't. Yeah, and it just keeps lingering, and it just it makes you mad. I mean, I hear us talking about special teams. I'm like, what would I want to see more of? And I guess it's just a unit that just seems like they want to be out there, right? We see the boneheaded penalties, we see Jake Bailey. Some of the worst punts we may have ever seen.
God, dude,
He did have a nice one, I think. He had one good one where people were at me, but yeah, man, outside Jason Sanders has been absolutely dismal, and you got to cut the snake off at the head, I guess, so to speak.
This was a good win for the Dolphins, Josh, but I do wonder if against a better team, if we would be having a different conversation, because late in the third quarter, the Dolphins found themselves in a very, very ugly situation where Mike McDaniel just went flat out full tilt. Started 3rd and 5 from the Cleveland 40-yard line. Snoop Huntley, a 4-yard rush. It was to the left side of the field. He kind of lunged out of bounds, and it was one of those things where he extended. It seemed like he might have gotten to the sideline. Josh, the Dolphins marked him a yard short, and Mike McDaniel, Dan Marino throws the challenge flag. Honestly, I didn't think this was a terrible challenge on the surface. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I didn't think that was a bad one, and I always wonder what's going on. Like, what are they hearing from upstairs? What are those guys in the booth saying? But yeah, I wasn't too upset with this one. But keep going, Jay, because I'm just sitting here laughing. Marino throwing that shit out there, and then everything else transpires after.
4th and 1. And Josh, you are so great at grabbing screens, catching everything that's happening during a game. There is a moment where Jeff Wilson, he's sitting all alone on the bench. I think it's even like, I knew we were down bad because he wasn't with the running backs. I think I recognized Jake Bailey sitting next to him. So Jeff Wilson sitting next to the punter, just head back, gazing off into space, because 4th and 1 now, because Mike McDaniel, he failed the challenge. All right, Mike, we know you suck at challenges, but I thought that was an okay one. Well, I'm not going to hit you too badly for it. So while that was happening, Mike McDaniel's in his bag cooking up a 4th down play. While Jeff Wilson's sitting on the bench next to a punter, Devon Achane lines up in the backfield in shotgun, takes a pitch to run back 3 yards and get tackled for a 2-yard loss. Josh, how much longer are we going to do this where the Miami Dolphins have one of the best fullbacks in the NFL, have 2 tight ends, Durham Smythe and Julian Hill, who are designated blockers, and continue to do this, God, I don't know, Mickey Mouse stuff on 4th and short? Like nothing against Devon Achane, nothing against anybody. Like, you can't be doing a play that you start 3 yards back in order to go 1 yard forward. That makes no sense.
Yeah, it just makes you scratch your head. I think Kendall Lamb absolutely whiffed on his guy, but I still feel like that play is absolutely blown up. And it just, how long do you ask it's going to go on to? I mean, we've seen it all year long. I'm hoping he finally learns next year. But when you have Jeff Wilson, like you said, on the sideline, just like he knows it, everybody in the stadium knows he should be out there. Even use Alec Ingold, use the Smythe, the motion where he, gets up under the center and tries to go. Use Tyler Snoop Huntley, with a tush push. I don't know, man. It's so infuriating. You said how terrible he is at challenges. I'm just sitting there, you hearing him devising up a 4th and short. I mean, he might be worse at, coming up at play calling it on short situations than he is at some of these challenges. So absolute terrible decisions back to back. And I think you're right, man. If this was a game against any other team, the Dolphins probably would have paid for a lot of these mistakes.
And I guess the idea is, the interior of the Dolphins' offensive line stinks. And the idea is the opposing defense is just going to be collapsing down on you. And I think Mike McDaniel's right. And the idea is you're just trying to get the ball out of the collapse and you're just trying to run around it, basically. The only issue is when you have these professional athletes who have been playing this sport since they're 5 years old, I think they can just fall forward through it and get a single yard. Like, I think this is just the simple Mike McDaniel scenario of he's trying to do too much. He's trying to scheme the perfect play to avoid what the defense is trying to stop, instead of realizing that the defense, needs to do everything it can in these scenarios and send everyone, because it's so hard to prevent a team from getting just 1 yard. Unless it's the Dolphins. But Josh, 2 plays later. So we're late in the third quarter. The Dolphins just turned the ball over on downs with the backup quarterback after not converting on 4th and 1. They just lost their first challenge, and they just lost their first timeout of the second half late in the third quarter. DTR just throws a pass in the backfield, and there was an angle. I will be full transparency. There was an angle. The first angle I saw, I'm like, that's backwards. That's backwards. And like, I was so excited because I think you did eventually see a Dolphins player recover it. And then they just show like 7 other angles. They show every other camera in the entire stadium. And it's so obvious it's a forward pass. So Mike McDaniel, head coach of a professional football team, thank God he was not facing a professional football team, the Cleveland Browns, because in the matter of 90 seconds, he turned the ball over on downs. He wasted 2 second-half timeouts and 2 second-half challenges on absolute nonsense. He was that kid playing Call of Duty who went full tilt. He tried to jump back in and died again, jumped back in and just died again and died again and died again.
I mean, it was poetic. I guess that's all you can say. I mean, that sounded like me playing Call of Duty. I don't know what got into Mike McDaniel. It did seem like you just said, F it. I'm just gonna try again. And you mentioned it, man. It did seem like at one point. Yeah, it did seem at one point like there might have been an angle, but even in those situations, they're always too close to call. And when they already called a incompletion on the field, you just know where it's going to go. So, a hilarious moment, but dude, we would not be laughing at all. But I mean, yeah, we won't be laughing at all if this was what did the Dolphins in, right? It would not be funny. And then Stephen Ross would be having some tough conversations. But now we can all just sit here and smile and laugh about it. But I want to say it's never going to happen again, but it probably
it's going to happen. Dude, Mike McDaniel is 4 for 18 on challenges. Dude, this is 100% going to happen again. But you saw that angle too. I was incomplete. Like the first angle, it did look like it was a backwards pass.
Yeah, I saw it too. But I'm also older and my eyes aren't the same. So I won't go by that, Jake.
The issue, though, is when you have a bajillion, and I'm not even being dramatic when I say a bajillion, Josh. There was a bajillion other cameras in that stadium that all showed it was back. Like, that was so insane to me. But man, so do you think something needs to happen here? Because these 4th short down yardage issues have been a long-term problem. Mike McDaniel on challenges 4 for 18. That's a long-term problem, even though he was so bad at it in only 90 seconds. Does something need to change about Miami's game day process? Do you feel like going into next year? Are some of these trends, like, has it been long enough where, Mike McDaniel's really learning, where we just got to say, all right, boss, you don't have the processor like Tua on the sidelines. You cannot do all this stuff at once, the awareness, and you can't really blame him. Just try to divvy up some of these responsibilities even.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely an issue. And I mean, we've hypothesized about, who may be giving up play calling duties. I don't know if that would even help in this situation. I mean, we've all said about investing in the offensive line. I mean, that would obviously help in these situations. There's so many different factors that the Dolphins could probably tweak things this offseason and should to remedy this. But it's the Dolphins, man. I feel like we're going to be posting the same damn Chris Greer, images and videos about the offensive line, and they're just going to have to rely on Tua's quick trigger, and even Snoop Huntley's. I think there was a stat that this was the quickest quarterback got the ball out against Cleveland's pass rush all season long, which they still got 4 sacks. But I mean, if that offense wasn't built that way, who knows what could have happened? So please, God, fix this, because it almost seems inevitably like we're going to be running it back with Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel next season, and we're just going to have to like it.
Would you trade a draft pick for like Big Dom?
I don't know. No.
No, but I think something has to happen, man. I can't do this anymore on game days where there are these scenarios where Mike looks so confused. And then I even look at the Jordan Brooks penalty. It's just him running out in the field yelling, "This is BS. This is BS." That's all. He's tantruming. And then you just see a coach just pull him back to the sideline, and then it's over. I just think that there's just so much happening on the sideline at a football game where I think he can be a good play caller. I think he can be a good head coach. And I think he's smart enough to be on his toes for late game situations. But I think there's been a lot of scenarios, man, where he's proven that I don't think we can trust him doing both. I don't know. Would you have a preference there? Would you rather him give up those, challenges, timeouts, those type of plays, or would you rather him kind of say, Frank Smith, let's see what you can cook up as a play caller?
Yeah, I think I once said Frank Smith, and that's kind of where I still lean. I thought, he was getting those head coaching opportunities. I thought, why not let him go out there and show you that he can call a game and do some of those things. So I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer. And if you're Mike McDaniel, that's your baby, right? You're what, third season
Right.
calling plays, or is his fourth? Either way, he hasn't been doing it very long. He's still trying to get become himself in his play calling. I do think, Jake, we're talking about his challenges, but he's also 3-15, I think, against teams above 500. So a lot has to change. And again, they're probably going to be running it back. But at this point, I want to see them beat the Jets. Is that crazy, man? Like, I want to see them beat the Jets. I want to see this somehow backdoor into the playoffs. And if someone put it on Twitter, how poetic would it be to see him, put an end to the Bills and Josh Allen's MVP season? And I know how crazy I sound saying all that. I'm sorry.
There's no doubt that's best case scenario for the Dolphins. 100%. You backdoor to the playoffs, and then Tua's healthy, and then they go into Buffalo, and it's I told you so game where they somehow do it. You know how crazy that sounds, man? You know how insane that sounds?
Yeah.
We're 35 minutes in, and I'm going to be rooting. I'm going to be rooting, Josh, for that exact scenario. But as we sit here on Monday afternoon, I personally think the best scenario for the Dolphins, they're playing at the Jets at 4:25. At the same time, Chiefs at Broncos. I, in a perfect world, feel like the best case scenario, the Dolphins go play a real proud game without Tua. You have some standout performances. Maybe Malik Washington catches 2 touchdowns. Chop Robinson, maybe he gets 3 sacks. I don't know, and he breaks that record. You have these real performances that build you the next season. You win 27-3. You have a really strong performance defensively again. Aaron Rodgers just looks sad on the sideline. Oh, darn, the Broncos won. Go have fun. You guys go have fun. Darn, we're not going to be in the playoffs. You guys have fun. Let's leave on a good note. I kind of think that, and don't get me wrong, I would love to see this team go and win a playoff game. If that is a possibility, I would always shoot for that. But we sit here on Monday, December 30th, Josh. Doesn't that sound like a pretty good end of the season?
Yeah, no, it sounds great. And you asked how crazy it sounds when you're sitting there saying about beating Josh Allen and them, and it does sound absolutely ridiculous. So we know any given Sunday, but I like your poetic end of the season, and then they can just sit there and stew on those early season losses
Broncos.
to a dive and then taking the hit and being out for 4 weeks or whatever it was, and hopefully build and again learn from those mistakes. We see it ever so slightly, but we're still sitting here in week 18 with so many different question marks about Tua's health, about Mike McDaniel's play calling, about the Dolphins team in general, and it just shouldn't be that way. But again, man, Hawaiian roller coaster ride always leads back to where we started. So it is who we are, man. In the Huntley, here we are.
Beautifully said, man. Beautiful way to wrap the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. I know everyone's super busy during the holidays. I hope everyone had a great Christmas, a great holiday season. Get geared up, have an absolute blast this New Year's, but most importantly, stay safe. We will be back later this week to preview Week 18, the final week of the season. Shout out one final time to the Miami Dolphins from 2-6 to give us an entire season of In the Hunt, man. That's moonshine. That's moonshine of fandom here, man. We are drunken off our minds, and we're just trying to muscle through it. But thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. We will be back soon, but until next time, fins up.
Fins up. Fins up.